Hello, YouTube. So I'm back. It's been a while. I've almost a year that I was in Houston, Texas, and came back to California. And a lot of water under the bridge, and a lot of bridges underwater. I have my studio set up. I'll have a separate YouTube channel for that soon. And I've been on the fence about getting back online and investing in YouTube, but because of the current events in the world and just what I see to be a need for further investment from independent journalists and people who don't have any ulterior motives to spin or outright lie about what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in America, which is often very much an import from the UK, America's roots. And in many ways, its ideologies, its policies, the attitude of the original republic, the attitude of that republic's opinion of democracy itself, which America has actually never achieved. Checks and balances won. The republic at the time feared what they would call mob rule, which today you call your unions. And there are a lot of thoughts that I have. I'll get into my background at some other point. But tonight I wanted to focus on the children of Gaza in the sense of keeping them in the background and in mind as I read some of the things that I wrote in the early days of post October 7th and what I wrote yesterday as well. And I have a Substack called Paradox House, and these two things that I'm going to read are from my Substack. One is on there dated October 11th, 2023, and the other one is coming. I've not updated my Substack in quite a while, but there's almost 800 articles on Substack right now that you can go to and read. So I'm going to do this old school. I don't have a teleprompter. Maybe someday I will if the channel grows and it merits the investment and the reconfiguration of my video setup. So this I wrote on October 11th, and just a little preemptive note about the environment that this was written under. I had just been doing a lot of research since October 7th. When Netanyahu came out and said that it was their 9/11, I intuitively felt that there was something in his voice that was exaggerated. And I also knew that the scale of the attack and the scale of the 9/11 situation simply did not match in scale. And so intuitively, my first curiosity was, well, why would anyone compare what happened on October 7th, although a tragedy unto itself, undoubtedly, not a surprising tragedy, considering the reasons it happened and how it happened, not necessarily why it happened, but how it happened. I mean, the why, of course, means something as well, but the how is something that you very rarely um, hear about in mainstream media. So when I felt this exaggeration, I immediately started to do some research, and thus began my journey down a pretty incredible rabbit hole of something that basically changed my life and my sense of my day to day life on this planet. Actually, um, I think I aged about 20 years in the last 3 years, um, just in the sense of uh, getting out of my own way and understanding that there are a lot of peripheral things that I took advantage of, taken for granted, not really taken advantage of, but things I simply did not know and I needed to know. I wanted to know. So this is something I wrote on a few days after October 7th. The only corridor of reason historically fascist leaders go down is the ones belonging to pallbearers. Intellectuals are not in charge. The least of deserving of power have it. The very core of civilization's autonomic nature will need to change first. We sit by and stare at leaders incompetent of humane will, love, fathering the earth, inner courage of self examination and reason, while content in the left and right sandbox they've pathologically created for their citizens. Left wing, right wing, all the while mesmerized by these appendages flapping this way and that way, statistically unaware of the single tail between its legs. If you wish to actually understand deeper what is going on, it's beginning via Israel and Palestine conflict. Research the Nakba of 1948 and Britain's role, the betrayal of promises made to the Arabian people. That was after World War II, by the way, via the Arabians' agreement to fight against Nazi Germany. And the ethnic cleansing of 600,000 plus indigenous peoples by a militarized force via Britain. And that militarized force, of course, were the early Zionist brigades that Britain trained and armed, and some were coming straight from World War II as well. America picked up the slack soon thereafter to establish a nuclear deterrent and maintain its fascist need for an enemy, to justify a deep and ancient patriarchal necessity for the other, reinforced by counterintuitive organized religion, which demands of its adherents, do as I say, not as I do. Cognitive dissonance abounds. Intelligence is a swamp gas bubble floating in an anonymous moonlit horizon, unaware, content that by being a deflection of its inner void, by mirroring its externals as itself, it will be okay. So I'm going to go back and add on to this a little bit just to bring things up to date. So Britain establishes in the Balfour Papers Israel's right to a home, and the word is home, not state. And when the first settler terrorists arrived in Palestine, Britain was also occupying Palestine as well. The King David Hotel was their main headquarters. And long story short, the brigades, the Zionist brigades, went a little further in their ethnic cleansing than what was at the time required or expected of by Britain. And one thing led to another. There were warnings from the British, and the Zionists bombed the King David Hotel, and eventually the British were forced to, at least in proximity to the Zionists, leave and hand over the project to the United Nations. In essence, Britain never disconnected from Israel. They flew hundreds and hundreds of recon missions over Gaza during the Gaza genocide, which is still happening today. And I also wouldn't be surprised that they weren't involved in some of the information gathering in the West Bank as well. So cognitive dissonance is a phrase I'm going to bring up quite a bit. Basically, it means holding two opposing beliefs at the same time, ultimately. Like wearing a green shirt that says, I hate green. This state of almost a form of mental illness is something very prevalent in this day and age. Something to be aware of and attend to if you find yourself under its influence. So the next one's a little bit longer, written March 23rd, 2006. Some of you younger than me would not remember this movie called The Burning Bed, starring Farrah Fawcett. It was pretty much a bombshell when it first came out. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but it's pretty intense, and it has a lot to do with domestic abuse and common sense and what happens when a human being is pushed beyond the boundaries of common everyday sensibilities and morality, and reaches a point of basically like a form of high functioning psychotic break in a way, like desperation, self-preservation, vengeance. There's a lot to it. And, people do lose their minds and still function in achieving their stated goals while in that field of chaos, pure emotion, pure survival instincts and response to enough is enough. So this piece starts off, The Burning Bed. This is the movie that appears in my mind when I step back and contemplate the long history of abuse by the UK and USA dealt upon the Middle East, which basically started in 1798 when Napoleon of France invaded Egypt. And since then, it has never stopped. just as far as putting a pin where the powder keg was lit by capitalists and a foreign entity coming into the region and claiming, recklessly claiming land and property and natural resources for themselves. From 1798 forward, there may have been earlier excursions by Spain, but as far as the UK and just the general players, it's considered the beginning of the colonizer trauma that's been dealt upon the Middle East. First, I ask, what level of inhuman day-to-day comfort must there exist for a collection of on-paper powerful people to find relief in constantly abusing, embezzling, raping, overthrowing governments, carpet-bombing civilizations, assassinating democratically elected officials so to replace them with dictators, etc.? Surely there's a saturation point of how much a region can take, and Iran is that red line. A red line earned by its people and those peoples dead and alive, alive and orphaned, orphaned and falsely imprisoned, imprisoned and tortured by way of collective punishment, disappeared by the CIA, held in black ops sites, etc. A prediction. Note, the apathy of the collective USA psyche and overall G7 psychopathy of elitism, comfort, uneducated disdain for the other, selfishness, mass sociopathy in not being able to feel Gaza, Iraq, Syria, Israel's preemptive strikes on anyone and anywhere, civilians be damned. The people's collective baubles so to deflect any time spent in self-reflection, active resistance in supporting such governments in thought, belief, and conversation has reached a fever pitch, and the status quo will not endure through 2026. The West in the world stage has earned this wake-up call. Humanity rarely comes voluntarily. I'm going to reread a part of this just so that in case my pausing confused anything. So basically, I'm saying these collective baubles, which would be, like entertainment or focusing on the lesser priorities in life that may be very urgent in everyday, but the way things are designed, people tend to lean towards the easiest and more lean towards distractions versus responsibilities, and until it's too late, you get a medical condition and realize that your insurance doesn't cover it and end up becoming a fatality, and 20 to 60,000 people a year die because they don't have health care, which is a kind of permissive societal permission for homicide. So we have also a very violent, radical regime in the United States, and that would be the capitalists, the for-profit industry, and that's all the way, from healthcare to schools. So at the end of this, the word is humility, not humanity. humanity could also be a word in this sentence. Humility rarely comes voluntarily. Iran will not negotiate. They understand the record of the IDF, Israel, i.e., the IDF never negotiate. Since while negotiating, this is when Mossad assassinates you. The same occurred with Hamas. Israel assassinated their top negotiator at the table. Meaning not where they were negotiating, of course, but that he was figuratively at the table ready to negotiate and had been negotiating, and they assassinated him, either at home with his family or perhaps out on the street when he was walking from one place to another. Either way, he was taken out, and this is a pathology that Israel has. It's basically a kind of policy of non-negotiations from the get-go. All of the two-state solution proposals throughout the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, none of them were legitimate. If you dig into it and research it, the concessions were always a self-sabotage by Israel, and they knew that it was a self-defeating document, that the concessions alone implied that there could not be a two-state solution. Like if you accept the concessions, you're still under the auspices of a militant, nationalist, ethno-supremacist society. So again, cognitive dissonance. Here's a two-state solution that is a problem. It's just, for lack of a better word, ridiculous, preposterous, and even inhumane. It robs a whole people of any sense of dignity or autonomy. It's a sad practice. Israel wants blood, not books. Iran also understands the pathology of the USA's double standards, their duplicity, and Iran understands the USA's continued support and quest to seize the Middle East capital, producing lands by proxy monarchs and cucked Dubai cucks, the little Israel. Nothing at this point can be trusted via Israel, G7, or the USA specifically. Only real change will do. Iran is not just acting from the standpoint of Iran itself. It is a collective response for decades of G7's freedom to abuse with impunity all of the Middle East, whenever, wherever there's a cry for help, democracy, or fairness. The monarchies do not represent their people, and the militias they command, like the American police states and military, are there not just to defend against invaders from the outside. They are primarily there to quell domestic dissent, posing as a subconscious reminder of individual powerlessness. So, the people go about their lives and their unsuspecting deaths daily, ever since 1798, when Napoleon invaded Egypt for his capitalist masters. From that point forwards, it has been a constant bloodbath of civilians, 1 million homicided in cold blood via the Iraq War. And where is George Bush? In prison? No. Where's Barack Obama, who approved drone attacks on innocent civilians, Yemen, Pakistan, and Somalia? In prison? No. Who hosted Netanyahu, a war criminal fugitive wanted by the ICJ and ICC? The U.S. The USA hosted him. and gave him a 20-minute standing ovation. Pure satanic decadence and moral putrefaction. Who wrote the ICC and ICJ threatening to sanction them if they come after Netanyahu, Congressman of the USA? Who has a declaration writ in law called the Hague Invasion Act to invade the Hague if any American officials are ever arrested? The USA. A great reckoning is unfolding, a blank book, since it has reached a point where words, promises, doublespeak, broken agreements, double standards, betrayal, etc., has all gone blank. Change has stepped up to the plate holding 10 bats. It will not strike out. That's my vibe. Iran is taking charge where the cowards of Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE will not. They have sold their dignity to the U.S. petrodollar and USA petting. China and Russia understand the deep feelings of enough is enough. The abuse reaches a level where the mind simply flatlines. This happened on October 7th too, the Gaza blowback, resistance, being a precursor, a spark, a hint, a warning none seriously owned or self-reflected upon, and why would a centuries-old, blind moralist patriarchy suddenly do a thing in the lap of blind luxury? The terrorist regimes of the U.S. State Department and Israel, Mossad, call the resistant movements dedicated to limit their terrorist ability to an easy mass slaughter. They call them terrorists. Israel would have taken Lebanon by now if it weren't for Iran and Hezbollah. This insincerity does have a timeline and lifespan in reality. Humans are not gods, but they surely have a hobby of creating them and assigning rights to themselves from a third person, place of favoritism and righteousness. Herein, the real demon lives, the one who reads a holy book by the light of the last page it read being on fire. Disclaimer. This is not an offense to the demon who reads this way out of desperation and who has no candles due to undeserved sanctions. There's open-ended layers of self-redemption. So, back to the children of Gaza. Over 72,000 civilians have been genocided in Gaza to this day. Tens of thousands of children. And this number, 72,000 plus, is been admitted statistically as a undercount, because basically Gaza is the world's largest open air cemetery at this point. And there's thousands of metric tons of debris where thousands of bodies have yet to be excavated, because that's part of also Israel's policy of collective punishment to disallow excavation and reconciliation around this situation. So that concludes what I wanted to do for today. Consistency and doing this every day or every other day, and building a channel is very important to me. And I feel like it's needed. People need to speak up and grow up. Being a reactionary is part of growing up. I mean, That's what children do, even when they're 50 years old or 60 or 70. Uh, the emotional quotient, which is the other side of IQ, um, the emotional quotient doesn't grow necessarily just because your body ages. Our president is proof enough of that. Um, so be well, take deep breaths, reason, empathize, self-reflect, ask what you're exchanging when you believe instead of fact check, and find out things for yourself. Do some research. Um, Elon Pape, Gabor Mate, Noam Chomsky, uh, Norman Finkelstein, Democracy Now. Um, there's a ton of really good resources on YouTube. Drop Site News. Hasan Piker is a decent platform as well, and yeah, just search, be curious, keep an open mind, trust your feelings, um, not the ones that you've borrowed from someone else to belong to a group that don't simply understand you as well as you want to understand yourself. And sometimes you have to choose between belonging to a group and belonging to yourself. It's hard, and there's going to be pushback. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this post, but frankly, it's necessary. It triggers people, and that means that it's effective, which is kind of a catch-22 in a way, that a solution creates a problem. But it also reveals the problem. And then that problem has to live itself out by being self-aware that it has a awareness around itself now. Some people don't know what their triggers are until they're triggered. And that changes a person for good or bad. Either way, change is good. And it means evolution has not completely given up on the planet and moved on to another solar system. So um, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and bless the dead of Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Iran, and the unfortunate soldiers of the IDF in the United States who chose to believe rather than be themselves in spite of all the indoctrination. Um, they're criminals, but they're also children deep down inside, lost and professionally confused. And it's a kind of sadness, not the same kind of sadness that I have for their victims by any means, no stretch of the imagination. But it is sad that all that potential, all those dreams before they met the indoctrinations and war machine that they signed up for, and some entrapped in many ways, that the price to pay is their actual life. We've all made big mistakes in our lives, But when you make a mistake and you're holding a gun, that mistake usually means your life. If you make a mistake holding a football or a wrench or a hammer, the worst that might happen to you is you miss the nail and break your thumb, or get a scratch or a bruise or a concussion. But big mistakes have different costs based on your career, and costs are rising these days. And I hope that more people speak out from the heart, and I hope it has an effect. Thank you for your time.